Present myself, J.R. Smith-DeCoo, Councilor Anton Moody, Councilor Kelly Swearingen, Councilor Craig Schulte, and Councilor Tim Kennedy. We also have City Communications Director Patrick Knight, City Administrator Mike Roth, City Finance Director Kim Dunsmore, City Attorney Chris Hood, and we also have Jeff Miller here from HKGI to discuss an item on the agenda. So those are all the people that are present. We will go to the open forum now, and we have received a number of open forum comments, and we'll let Patrick take care of those right now. So he'll read those off in no particular order, and then we will move on from there. So at your leisure, Patrick.
Right, you can hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This is from the Grand Marais Business Coalition. The Grand Marais Business Coalition requests that the Grand Marais City Government impose, whether by proclamation of the mayor or by action of the City Council, an emergency regulation requiring that face masks be worn by everyone entering all city-owned public buildings and all private buildings that serve as public accommodations. The Business Coalition further requests that the city similarly require that all people wear masks in all outdoor areas within the city where maintaining 6 feet of distance from others is not feasible, such as lines to receive restaurant orders. Family homes and yards should be exempted. So that's the first comment. Here's the next one from Robin Penner and Bob Tamahana of Hoveland. Greetings. Please convey to the members of the City Council my strong plea to make masking mandatory in public and inside of city businesses, and ask them to come up with a mechanism to enforce it. We wouldn't tolerate nudists or smokers or public defecation on our streets and in our businesses, and we mandate and enforce other safety measures like seatbelts with little difficulty. I would argue that universal mask wearing is vastly and critically more important to the health and safety of our citizens at this time than any of the other constraints we willingly adopt. Unfortunately, too many people are unwilling to simply wear a mask to help control the spread of COVID-19. The time has come to legislate it. I do not feel safe coming to Grand Marais from Hoveland to do business in the current climate. I have seen business owners threatened and have myself been harassed for wearing a mask. I don't know a single person willing to send their children into Grand Marais for school the way things are. Please follow science and immediately mandate mask wearing in Grand Marais and enforce it. Thank you, Robin Penner and Bob Tamahana, Hoveland. The next one is from Mark Shackleton of the Grand Marais Subway. If the citizens of Grand Marais wish it, and it is within the authority granted to the mayor, council, then so be it. But this should not be a way of providing cover to individual business from making personal business decisions they have every right to make. I believe it would be best if Cook County acted together if possible. Even better would be to let the governor make a statewide order. To have a mishmash of policies within the county would be frustrating and confusing to locals and visitors. The mayor of Minneapolis put that order in place because the city was experiencing very high infection rates. I personally believe strongly in wearing face masks. My thoughts, Mark Shackleton, Grand Marais Subway. This one is from Lila of the Grand Marais Art Colony. Following up from our conversation a short while ago, I'd like to state that I believe in the importance of masks and face shields to deter the spread of COVID. However, I would like to highlight the tremendous difficulty this widespread masking presents for people who are deaf, hard of hearing, and those who have age-related hearing loss and don't know they lip read. If the city of Grand Marais is going to mandate masking, I'd like to ask that there be some accommodation, if not stipulation or serious encouragement, that face shields or transparent masks be used in more public settings such as the post office, stores, etc., whenever possible. From personal experience, given my profound reliance on lip reading, I either have to ask someone to remove their mask so I can understand what they're saying, or resort to pencil and paper, both of which defeat the goals of keeping apart and wearing a mask. There are multiple accounts of the challenges that masks foist upon deaf and hard of hearing people, as illustrated in the 2 links below. Both of these links are from a website called theconversation.com. Thank you for your consideration, Violet. And finally, a letter from John Gorski of Grand Marais. The last time Grand Marais had a community visioning process, I was a vocal proponent of infill housing as a solution to an already identified affordable housing shortage. I was roundly and soundly shot down. Much has changed since then. The problem of affordable housing has become more acute, and I appreciate your effort to find more diverse and affordable housing options. Unfortunately, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, I respectfully must say that this is not the time to proceed with such an ambitious and consequential proposal. Zoning changes, as you've proposed, would be ambitious and life-altering for everyone who lives in Grand Marais. You would see the loss of our urban forest, loss of historic homes and businesses to tear down investors, fights over view sheds, loss of privacy, and an undeniably changed Grand Marais. These issues will be viewed differently by different people with different goals, desires, and passions. A path to consensus on these issues will be difficult and at times contentious. Everyone deserves equal access to information and an equal opportunity to voice their thoughts, concerns, and ideas. This cannot be achieved at a time when it is not safe to participate in public meetings, and many are unable or unprepared to participate via electronic communication. This process, regardless how important, must be tabled until a time when the entire community can participate in defining the future of our hometown. Respectfully, John Gorski, Grand Marais. That's it.
Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you for reading those, Patrick. And it's good. It's always good to hear what people are thinking about. It's a good barometer on that. So moving on from the open forum, we have the consent agenda in front of us, and so we have a couple of decisions to make here with the consent agenda. As normal, on the consent agenda, we have this meeting's agenda. We have the previous meeting minutes. We have payment of bills, and then we have 2 additional things. We have the Lions raffle permit, and then we have a new hire for the park department. But the question I have is, I wonder if, as part of our emergency update, I assume that we probably don't need to change the agenda, but add to that emergency update a conversation about, or basically just trying to take the temperature of the council on this this concept of a mask ordinance. So if the council feels like that communicates plainly what we're trying to do here, then I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda with that understanding. Otherwise, it would be the time to change the agenda if necessary. So
I move that we approve the consent agenda as is.
okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right, motion and a second. Any further discussion on the consent agenda? Hearing none, we'll go to our roll call vote. Start with Councillor Moody. What's your vote?
Aye.
Councillor Swearingen?
Aye.
Councillor Schulte?
Aye.
Councillor Kennedy?
Aye.
And I am an aye as well. So the motion passes, and we will move along with the agenda as presented. All right, so first thing we have is the Planning Commission report, 2 items on there. One is the Smith variance for Creechville, and then another is the residential zoning modifications, first reading of this ordinance proposal, which is why Jeff is with us today. So, Tim, I don't know if you want to step in and give us a brief summary of the Smith variance. It sounds like the lot that we're asking for here, or asking about here, is really quite small, and the variance is also quite small. So if you want to jump in with that, go ahead. Or else I can do it too, it doesn't matter.
Just have to press that unmute button. So,
Gotcha.
so this is located up in the Creechville area on 4th Avenue West. And it's an existing lot that has a cabin on it, a home on it, a garage on it. And they're asking to split this parcel, which is, considerably sized. I'm trying to look at the lot size here. It's 173 by 184 foot size parcel. They're asking to create a lot that would be 59.5 feet in width, and it's to accommodate separating the home off from the cabin and garage property. Both of the structures that are located there would still meet the required 10-foot minimum side yard setback. The Planning Commission held a public hearing. There were no public comments received. I guess I'll just leave it at that, and if there's any questions.
The Planning Commission found that the variance was in line with all of the use of the property and voted 4-0. Is that correct?
Right. The findings all met the requirements of the ordinance in terms of the findings that are necessary to grant a variance. Planning Commission recommended by a 4-0 vote to approve the variance request.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions regarding this variance as it's being made? Also, I'd like to point out that we do have in the packet Resolution 2020-06, that if there's no objection to this variance request, then I would also entertain a motion to approve that resolution for this variance. So we got a couple different avenues to go down here. What are we thinking? What are we feeling?
Jay, I just want to clarify so that anybody watching knows, the lot to the north, I believe, my understanding is they are going to have to put in their own utilities there, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
That was one of my questions too when I was looking at the drawing, because it looked like there might be connections between those two buildings that might make things a little bit more complicated. But as long as they have a plan to get the utilities worked out for the two different lots, so that meets all the criteria, because that's where I'm at. Anything else? Oh, go ahead.
I wanted to make sure that if people are watching and read any minutes or anything, it's part of the packet, but that people understand that that was determined by us, that there has to be separate utilities, and that will occur.
Cool. Any other thoughts on that? Or any motions?
I'd make a motion to approve the variance and resolution 2020-06.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion on resolution 2020-06? Hearing none, we will go through the roll call vote.
Actually,
Councilor Moody. Oh,
Brad.
go ahead. Yep.
oh, somebody else trying to say something too. I had a quick question. Is there a timeline? So I listened to the Planning Commission meeting, and it sounded like that right now that cabin is disconnected from the run that's connected into the city utilities. Is there any sort of timeline, or how is that like overseeing that actually will take place before like habitation? Anybody? Mike, do you know how that works, or Tim?
What's currently disconnected is my understanding as well. So
Right, right.
the purchasers have been informed of that prior to any of the variance requests being made. That was something that we talked about with the applicant and their realtor. So the purchasers know that they're buying a cabin that's not livable and that they need to install their own utility services. So I'm anticipating that they'll also be making other improvements to the property, and during that permitting process, we'll talk about their utility connections.
Okay. I just,
You know, we also have an electric utility, and they're going to need that. So
Yeah.
okay. Thank you.
Any other comments? Hearing none, we'll go through the roll call vote. Start with you, Councilor Moody. Your vote.
Aye.
Councilor Swearingen,
Aye.
Councilor Schulte,
Aye.
Councilor Kennedy,
Aye.
and I am an aye as well. Resolution carries or is adopted. Okay, so we'll move through that, and I suppose that there's probably a few things we can do just to make sure that the utilities get put in the way that, well, I guess we're going to have to make sure that the utilities get put in the way that they need to, but that's a different process. So we'll get into that. Next thing on the Planning Commission agenda is for the housing zoning modifications. So a little bit of a background on this, and then we'll let Jeff take it away, hoping that he'll break down a little bit of the process, some of the findings that they had, and then the recommendations or suggestions that they've come up with, plus why, basically. So last year, after we had, the council had a prioritization meeting, the housing situation was a high priority, one of the highest, if not the highest priority that was identified. So we decided to move forward on that in earnest. That looked like bringing in some extra help. That's where we found HKGI to help us go through the housing zoning ordinance so that we were able to see if there were unnecessary barriers in that ordinance or outdated terminology or a lack of current terminology that would hinder builders, so that we can make sure that the city ordinance is not preventing any housing development within the city unnecessarily. Let's put it that way. So with that, we have done some public engagement. We've gotten some of the people that we're hoping to have find houses around come, and we interviewed them. We've also thrown out multiple surveys to the community, and with that information and the work that HKGI did, we end up having the proposals as they are here. So that is a brief summary of what we have, what got us to where we're at right now. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jeff Miller, and you will correct the things that I said wrong, and then you'll move forward with explaining the rest of the details to us.
So Jay, I'm going to jump in quick because actually I told Jeff he didn't have to prepare a presentation this time.
Gotcha.
Please feel free and ask him any questions. If there's anything you want him to talk about, that's why he's here. But now that the ordinance is prepared and in front of the council, I think it's probably time for us to take a little ownership of it. So I won't correct anything you said, Jay. I thought it was a great summary. I just want to go through a couple things in the memo, and then we can get into it because it's a pretty long ordinance. There are some project goals that were established by the Planning Commission. What are we trying to achieve here? We're trying to achieve the community vision statement on housing. We want rules that are easy to understand and comply with. We want to, as you said, remove barriers to new housing units being built. We want to allow additional use of the existing public infrastructure. We want to bring most existing residential development in compliance, and we want to design regulations and limits that protect the top community values and issues. Yep. One of the first steps in the project was to have HKGI do a pretty significant data collection and analysis for us. They created a number of maps that try to describe how housing exists in the community right now. And so that's in order to meet a couple of the goals above. One, to see what's going on right now to make sure that what's being proposed is actually related to the way that this town was developed initially, and then also just to bring some of those things into compliance. And we found that, and this was no surprise to the Planning Commission, much of the town was developed before the zoning ordinance existed and was on significantly smaller lots, significantly smaller setbacks. Just didn't really look like the 75-foot lot, 10,000 square feet that is in the ordinance right now. Those maps have been reviewed by the public. They're available for anybody. They've been on our website for, I don't know, close to 9 months or so, maybe. After that initial work, HKGI developed an implementation plan for us to take what they found with that engagement, with that analysis, and come up with some steps for us. The Planning Commission selected some of the steps from that implementation plan and hired HKGI to come back and help us actually do it. This is the result of that work, this ordinance. So there's a few things going on in the ordinance. There's a lot of reorganization, first of all, and then there's some new language. So the first reorganization is the R2 district is proposed for elimination. It'll just be absorbed into the R1 district. The RCN district, because it's generally a residential as well, is being moved in the ordinance so that it's next to the other residential districts. The new housing types have been listed in all of our residential districts, and definitions have been added for those new housing types. There are accessory dwelling units, small and large apartment dwellings, row house, townhouse dwellings, and cottage courtyard developments that have been added. Tiny houses, something that people have been talking about a lot lately. It's not identified as a separate use because we don't have any minimum sizes for structures in the ordinance. So you can call it a tiny house if you want to, but we're not concerned about how big the structure ends up being. Folks can build what they like. Manufactured housing, it's also not going to be a separate use anymore. When that was added to the ordinance, it was trying to deal with an issue that's really not relevant anymore. We're not concerned about construction techniques with this ordinance, and so whether it's small or large or manufactured or stick-built is not being addressed in the ordinance. The only caveat there is that a manufactured home park still has some state regulations, and we would treat those separately as well. So then all the residential uses are being talked about in a table that's separate from maybe I've skipped ahead here. So we split up the uses in the residential zones between principal and accessory uses. So accessory uses is a separate list that didn't exist before. Now there's a new table with lot dimension standards for residential uses. Those have been stripped out of the table with the other zones, which serves two purposes. One, we're dealing with these residential dimensions slightly differently than we're dealing with some of the other zones, and two, now we can fit it on the whole page rather than having it run off the side, which is nice. The table that has lot dimension standards has significantly reduced the minimum lot width requirement and area based on each housing type. And you can look at that, and we can talk about that later on. And then the building height and yard setback regulations are listed in each of the two districts rather than in the table, since they're really, they're not very different by housing type. We don't need to have them in the table to separate that out. We're adding a regulation that allows a smaller front yard setback under certain circumstances when other existing buildings on the block are already closer than 25 feet. Side yard setbacks are going to be reduced from 10 feet to 5 feet, except for larger scale homes. And then a new section, use specific standards, is added for organizing things. We had use specific standards included in a lot of different places in the zoning ordinance. We've removed quite a few of them. We've added some new ones, and we're just reorganizing it so that they're all in one place. And in another reorganization, anything that was a sign regulation that was spread throughout some of the different uses is now located in the sign regulations section. And then we made a few spelling and grammatical corrections as well. So I think this is a good time to stop and see if anybody has any questions about the process that led to this ordinance, and then also about the ordinance itself.
Can I ask a question? My question is on the corner yard setback in the R1. It talks about the minimum of 25 feet, or if there's 2 or more lots on the same block face have dwellings, the minimum setback shall be the setback of the dwelling closest to the street, and the maximum setback. What's a maximum setback? I don't understand that language. I mean, what? I mean, if the
what that language means is that any new structure would have to be built no further away than the furthest structure. The only other section in our ordinance where we include a maximum setback is in our design criteria and a couple of the blocks downtown, where we require new construction to have a 0 lot line setback.
So, yeah. So is this taking place then? So which one? How would you figure out in that corner situation where, like, what is the? Does it depend on what street on that corner you'd be trying to get closest to? I guess is like to see what else is existing on the street. Because I didn't know that there was. So currently, like, if what are they, 130-foot deep lots typically in the R1? I mean, just nominally 135 or whatever it is. It's something like that. So if you right now have it at 25 foot as your, that's the closest you can get to your property line against the street. If you wanted to put a place all the way back close to like where the alley line is, you're saying that there's a limitation to that depending on what is existing on the street already, because there's now a setback maximum. Is that right?
You're reading that right. Yeah.
Huh. Okay.
And that exists for the front yard setback, the corner yard setback.
Why does it? Can I ask what the point of that is? I mean, I can understand, the 25, and I know that there is a hindrance to then on a corner lot because you basically have 2 frontages, right? So you might be 25, and if you're on an 80-foot lot, well, now you just shrunk, right? Your space. But what's the benefit to this to have a maximum setback?
Jeff, you want to try that one?
That's a good question. The way we got to that language was we started with allowing a closer setback and looking at the average of existing house setbacks on the block. So similar to what you're seeing in there today. And then we talked about that with the planning commission and staff, and felt that maybe the averaging might have some complexity to it. And so then decided another route would be to go with the minimum is the closest one and the maximum would be the furthest one. So I think that's a good point. That's something that other cities do, but you could separate those two things and just say houses could go as close as the closest one and not change or make the change of having a maximum. You could separate those two things if you wanted to.
I mean, I guess if you're trying to cite something, if you're trying to fit something in, whether it's a garage or it's a house, or now we have the option for ADUs, which I guess is maybe even a different setback, but not on a corner lot. I mean, it still is a little bit maybe not easy to grasp, but you know, if say every house on the street was at 25 feet or right, and at 25 feet where it's supposed to be, except for a couple older places that were 10 feet, well, that means that if you wanted to be 30 feet off the sidewalk because your house fit on there better, or off the property line, you couldn't go 30 feet because you have to then stick at that 25 feet. Is that right?
That's how it's written. Yes. Yes.
Okay. That seems limiting. I think the piece of how it fits into how I understand, I guess, the taking into account historic locations on things. I don't know. I think it's a challenge because I feel like there's a couple. I mean, do we know that some of those what about, I mean, I can think of some in particular that I'm sure there were variances to get put where they got put. So now if we're using something that had to get a variance, so it could basically be 5 feet off the property line, and now we're using that as our basis for what everybody else can do, that seems like, you know, it seems like it's out of place as is, and now it's just going to make more things appear out of place if people are, I don't know. I mean, I think I understand it, but I feel like, how do we know is, you know, there's not a historical context of saying, oh, this was done in 1948 before the zoning standard versus this was done in 1996 under variance, and that's where they put this. So now it gives ability for people to be able to kind of run with that. Does that make sense?
Kind of loophole the variance process. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it wouldn't be a variance because this is how the ordinance is written. So now it's completely, you don't have to do the variance. But that's all I'm wondering. I mean, because I do feel like I don't know. I mean, I feel like didn't we even bring it up at our last meeting about like a walkway or like a pedestrian path through a particular area because of a variance and a shutting down of a street. And, you know, like now we're living with the ramifications of that. Well, if we're writing into our ordinance now a variance that was passed that for whatever reason was passed, you know, it just seems like, I don't know. I'm not trying to blow this thing apart either. That's one of the questions I had. I'm always.
Yeah, I think that's great, Anton. And my when I think back to the variances from front yard setbacks since I've been here, almost always they're using neighboring properties as one of their justifications. So I think it's actually the other way around, that we're now making legal what we've generally allowed people to do anyway. And I don't think that there's going to be many cases what you're talking about. But between now and the next time you look at this, we'll take a closer look at that and see if indeed there are a number of circumstances the way you're describing it. Other than that, I'd say, like Jeff said, the minimum and maximum can definitely be separated. The maximum is a relatively new concept in the conversation. And I think it's a result more of trying to find an elegant way to deal with allowing people to get closer in those developed sections of town where most other places are already closer. I don't know that the maximum was ever something that was important to the development of this.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, my personal take on that is, I think that, you know, if there is some, I like the language. I think, except for maybe that part I brought up about riding past variances. And I can talk about that or send you a note on a couple places. I think that just like, boy, if all of a sudden that got to happen up the whole street, like what would that be like? You know, but I think that especially in like infill lots that exist in town, I think that the ability to maybe have that flexibility to go a little closer if it fits in with what's existing is great. But I think that it's just adding an extra burden then to say, like, also you can't be any further away than this, when why wouldn't somebody, if they had a small house they were putting on, now we can do a 4,000 square foot lot where you can't at 50%, 2,000 square foot that's a lot of that lot, right? So if you put 1,000 square foot house or a 600 square foot house, maybe you don't want it right up against where the street is. Maybe you want it in back, so you've got that separation between, where people are walking on the sidewalk and where you'd want to be, where you'd want to have your house, right? So I feel like it's a limitation. It's great. I think the shrinking up of the minimum lot sizes, but I think that I don't mean to keep getting hung up on that, but I think the maximum setback is I don't personally don't see what that does.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I'm not advocating for it because I do agree with you, and I think it's easy to separate the two things. And we were focused on the minimum, but there is a trend in zoning that some cities are adopting that's more about the form and the relationship of houses or buildings to streets, and they end up changing their setbacks to build two zones, they call them. So there is a minimum and a maximum, and the intent of that is, they want buildings to be related to the street at a certain level. So they don't want buildings way far away from it. They also don't want them too close. So it's more of a range than a straightforward minimum number. So, but that, I'm just explaining it. I do think you can easily separate those two things and keep the flexibility of the minimum, and you could remove the maximum if that's not the right thing to do now.
Okay. I guess since I've been talking so much, I'll say one last thing and then I'll shut up for a little bit and listen if anybody else has anything to say. But do we think speaking to what John mentioned in his note, do you think that because of the situation that we're in, I'm super impressed with the work. I think it's a super dense document. Like, I've read through it a couple times and I'm not sure, like not every time, both times I've gone through it, there's been things that I've kind of either been a little bit trying to think on and think about what the ramifications of those things are. Not that the planning commission hasn't, and Jeff haven't put a lot of time, and the folks that showed up for the different public comments and, opinions and all that stuff. But do you think that, is it in something this big, do you think that the situation we're in, all meeting on our computers and not being able to have the face-to-face conversation, I feel like the conversation we had, that one meeting where it was a public meeting that we just kind of brainstormed and people talked about ideas, there was quite a few people there, and I think there was more than one of those. And so I think to not get any feedback except for one kind of last minute, whoa, wait, what? Does anybody else think that that's odd, or do you think it's just people are so preoccupied with everything else that's happening right now?
Kelly?
Yeah, I do think it's odd. I am very appreciative of the work that Jeff has done, that the work the Planning Commission has done. I think this is worked through. I have a lot to read through again still. This is overwhelming when it's not the day-to-day thing that you deal with and think about. And my hours are limited in a day, so I need to read again. But I really feel like we're missing a lot of public comment and I'm not going to venture to guess the reasons. I know that we've had some, but I don't feel that we've had the input at my comfort level. I'll leave it at that. And I don't know right now, last week the Planning Commission met on July 1st, kind of a holiday week. Here we are looking at stuff the week after a really long holiday. Maybe people are still vacationing. I just think the timing, people's lives have been so disrupted since the middle of March that I'm sure a lot of people aren't looking. And I have a feeling if I walked around and talked to people and said, well, in this new ordinance in R1, I could put up row houses. My lot's perfect. I got 3 city lots here. I could take down my house and put row houses. What do you think? And I have a feeling we'd have a whole lot of feedback on it. And again, I don't know why we haven't had it so much. I guess I'd like to see us advocate somehow more, get it out there, get what's in this packet out there. I know our packets are not online for people to take a look at right now. I looked the other day and I was like, oh, it's not there. I would like us to, I don't know that I want to say table, because that makes it feel like it could be indefinite, but I definitely would like to see us pursue other avenues of getting more discussion by the public, because I just feel we're missing that. And, you know, that's not Planning Commissioner Jeff's fault. I don't find anybody at fault. It's just how I feel.
I mean, that's, I guess, how I feel. Like, I don't think that, I just think that because of, I know the amount of discussion, and I think we had to cut that meeting off that we had. I mean, because of like the amount of conversation that we had. I guess that's my biggest thing. I'm not, again, I want to see these changes. I think they're positive changes, a lot of them, but I'm not sure that, yeah, I mean, that's the Planning Commission's job. I'm interested to hear what Tim has to say too, but I just think, because they've obviously been putting a lot of work into this with Jeff and others. So, but I guess because of what I do hear on things, I'm surprised that I haven't heard too much about this. And I do think it is a quick turnaround from, 4th of July, weekend, whatever, meeting, Planning Commission to now. And maybe that's with the second reading and there's time in between there. Yeah, that's what I got.
But at a second reading, if enough people came forward in the next 3 weeks, are we, in essence, throwing the baby out with the bathwater to kind of re-angle it? Because I don't, then where do we go from there? So I don't know, but that's more discussion we can have, and Tim and probably Jeff and Mike and a couple other counselors have to talk yet. So.
And before you jump in, Tim, I'm also curious, at some point in this conversation, if Patrick could give us a summary of some of the public outreach exercises that we've done with this over the time that we've been working on it. And maybe, Jeff, if you had some things that HKGI did as well to gather information, that might be handy information as well. Right now, since we have, I think we lost Patrick. Right now, hopefully this will get the community's attention. So I don't mind, Kelly, like you were saying, the concept of tabling this for a little bit, just so that people can have time to process what the information is that we're actually talking about in the ordinance. Because I also agree with what Anton said, is that I think that the vast majority of these changes are things that are they accomplish the goals that we set out, which is basically to remove the barriers to development of housing and to clarify and update the ordinance. So so I don't know, Tim, if you want to go first, or if Patrick wants to talk about what communications we've done, or Jeff, or okay, Tim, you're unmuted first, so we'll go with you.
Yeah, I'll go ahead, but if Craig, you have anything you want to add too, I'll kind of follow up, because I think this is all good conversation. So if Craig, if you want to have anything to say, I'll let you go ahead before I do.
Okay, I just think that not being able to meet publicly on something like this, the timing probably isn't the greatest right now. I think John Gorski kind of hit the nail right on the head, that this may not be the time to proceed with something like this. I would like to be able to have a meeting where people can come in, and even if we can limit the number of people or how we do this, if they have to go inside and come back inside and outside, whatever, I just think that people need time to digest what's been done here, including myself. And I think given some people some public ability to speak about it, I think is important. And maybe the timing is not the greatest right now because of the COVID and because we're meeting. As a matter of fact, I thought 3 or 4 meetings ago, we were going to start meeting in City Hall, and we were still sitting here doing this. And I'd rather be in City Hall, and I think we can maintain distances there and still allow certain people numbers to come in and talk to us if they need to. I think it's hard for people to voice their concern on a forum like this. And if they do voice it, it's going to be after the fact. So then we have to have another meeting and read something that somebody said and then deal with it. So I agree kind of on the lines Anton was talking and Kelly concerning this topic right now at this point in time.
So Tim, do you want to go, or does anybody else want to talk a little bit about what's been done?
Well, I'll go ahead. I think, you're all, pretty accurate in your assessments. Is that the timing of this is not good. We haven't been able to engage the public in a way that, at least in the final stages of this, preparing this document for council consideration. So I think that there are issues and concerns that I think the community needs to weigh in on, whether it's to say this is something that they want to see, or they think that there are issues with this. I mean, the Planning Commission started out, and I think did great work. They started out though with the focus that of the direction that we had given them as a council, and through other community meetings and conversations we've had to come up with an ordinance that would address those issues within the zoning ordinance that affected affordability for housing. And I think the Planning Commission has done that, and the document that you have in front of you reflects the work that the Planning Commission has put in over the last, well, almost a year. Until it gets to the council and goes to this type of a setting, where we can have these conversations about the content and how it fits in the community, I'm not ready to pass this yet without having some assurances that the community supports what we've done. And I've voiced this at the Planning Commission meeting, that we have no gauge to this right now. And I think we need to understand, is this what the community wants? Because it's only going to be as successful as the support we get from the community. And if we missed our mark, better to know it before we adopt the ordinance than to adopt the ordinance and find out later.
Okay. Well, then let's shift the conversation a little bit then. So understanding that there are still some questions that have to do with the content of the amendment to the ordinances that we're looking at. Perhaps now is the time where we would shift our focus on how do we get this information, like the ordinance as is proposed here. How do we get this out to the community as much as we can? We should, set a time frame for this so that people know that this is something we actually want to have. We want to have some action on this, and then we can perhaps put together some type of forum meetings so that we can have so that we can get some feedback, some real-time feedback, or something like that. That's certainly a proposal. Patrick, I see you're unmuted. Did you have something to add?
Yeah, I can give the numbers about the engagement we have had. So the first thing I did to create if you go to ci.grand-marais.mn.us/housing plan, that's kind of the hub for all of this information. So that's where you can find the videos that the Planning Commission has of the Planning Commission meetings, all the documents that Jeff has prepared, the summary, and the final document. And the other engagements that we did around that to promote it send it out into the public were a month of News Herald advertisements that kind of summarized what was being done and pointed people to that website. A boosted Facebook post that reached 12,000 people and engaged 174 people. And then a YouTube video, about a 2-minute summary that was a pop-up ad. So that video had 11,000 impressions. So that means it showed up in front of people where they're using an app or watching some other video, and they could skip it. And of that, so 11 of those 11,000 impressions, there were 2,738 people who actually watched the video. So we have had engagement on this. That's just the report I have.
I think that my point is that I think the process has been good as far as engagement when this all started. And I think I would like to see that those people who did engage, I would like to see what they think of what the final document is. And to say like, how do we do? You know, like, is this what we're going after? That's what I say. So I'm not doubting at all the work that's went into this. I'm not doubting at all the ability and the way that you engaged and reached out. My biggest thing is, it would be awesome for me is if like it was all one type font and not crossed out. I mean, I think it's helpful for us to see what those changes were, right? To see what it used to say, right? I understand, I think, why it's in the format that it's in, so we can see the changes. But it would, like, I don't know what it would take to put it into like, just here's our new plan. Like, we can still have this other one if you wanted to cross-reference what it used to say, but this is what our zoning ordinance looks like now. And maybe it's, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe it's more helpful to be able to see the changes that were made so people can see that. I don't know. Maybe it's just my inability to focus when there's too many cross-outs and red letters and whatever. But yeah, so I think I'm not doubting the engagement throughout the process. I just want to see engagement now at the end before we act on it.
So another round of engagement, basically.
And maybe that's time. Maybe it's
what
just
I'm hearing though is not, you're not talking about the engagement. You're talking about what the engagement has produced, and you want to have a different type of outcome from the engagement in order to help you feel more comfortable to move forward on this.
I don't know.
I mean, let me rephrase then. You're not hearing from people, and you need to.
Well, it would be, yeah. And I mean, that's the thing. If nobody cares and they think it's great, then, if we gave it a little bit of time, maybe what if we just said, we're going to do our first reading at the next meeting? I don't think that hurts anything in the process, and it would give people, and, I'm assuming that the people that showed up for those in person back in, what was it, wintertime, right? When we did those ones in City Hall, one of the first time, or maybe not the first time Jeff was up, but with those public, we had residents and builders and all different kinds of people in there. I think we passed around an email sheet, right? A sign-in sheet for that. I mean, could we email? We have their contact information. Could we just give those people an email to be like, hey, thanks for participating. This is what we got. What do you think? And you know what? Maybe they won't respond. And then it does fall for us to make sure that we look at this smartly, which I think the Planning Commission has done, and worked hard on it. But then it does fall to us. But maybe we'll get 3 people, right? That'll be like, and maybe you'll get people that are just like, oh, this is a terrible idea. But if we don't think it's a terrible idea, it's our job to still make the choice, right? But to not have to just have radio silence, to me, and again, I think it was last week, right? I mean, we had, how long do we have from when the draft was out to when the planning commission? Was it a couple weeks? That's how long it was open to be able to comment?
Yeah, but keep in mind that, the contents of that draft have been developed over a series of months, months well before COVID was an issue. And that the content of that information has been available to people to look at. I'll just say a few things about the process. The Planning Commission itself had conversations about how do we engage the public really ever in a worthwhile conversation about zoning, and just try it out sometime, and talk about the purpose of a front yard setback with your neighbors. And it can be interesting, but it's also super, super dry. And it's not surprising to me that you're not going to get a lot of folks that are willing to invest the amount of time it would take to, you all know now the amount of time it's going to take to read through and understand that. So there is some level of, if you think it's the right thing to do, you'll have to go forward with maybe less communication at this point than you wanted, but you've had a lot of communication about this issue over the years. And I think you can rely on some of that to at least know that the goals are correct. In terms of public meetings being the answer, I don't think that's a good tool to get feedback on an issue like this. I don't think it's a good tool to get feedback very often, because you still hear from a very limited number of people, but because they're in front of you, that voice carries a little more weight. And most of the time when we've got ordinances and variances, our public hearings are not particularly well attended. And I think that's probably true in most communities. So the fact that we're reaching out and we're trying to use other tools to let people know what's going on and not necessarily rely on that meeting as the one and only to give us some comfort to move forward on this, that makes sense to me. But that's not what's important here. You're the ones that have to vote on this. So it's always our goal to make sure that you feel comfortable either moving forward or not moving forward with an issue. And I'm hearing pretty clearly from all of you that you're not there yet. So I don't want to just redo what we've already done and expect that anything's going to be different. We can try to have some format of public hearing. As a matter of fact, we had some contingency plans to anybody who did reach out to us who wanted to try and make comment, but didn't want to do it via email or other ways to help them with that. But we didn't hear from anybody that wanted to make comment at all. That's a little troubling for sure. It's troubling to us as well. And I don't think you can discount the COVID emergency, but I also think that it's related directly to the fact that zoning is not a appetizing topic for many people.
But I think that I would agree with that, Mike. And I think that part of that, though, is even getting it in front of the council. Not that there's thousands of people streaming this right now, but the idea that when it's before the council, I feel like there's a little bit maybe more attention paid, maybe, potentially.
Well, we're definitely going to be talking about it. I'll be talking about it with Rhonda tomorrow on WTIP. So, that's definitely something that would, that another outlet that it's going to be out there on. So that's, that's something to keep in mind too, Anton.
Well, I think that's my biggest thing is I don't want this to start over, and I don't want it to stall out, and I don't necessarily want, but I'm not afraid to make the vote, on it. It's not that. It's not like shirking that responsibility. I just feel like it's our responsibility to, I don't know. Yeah.
Well, the municipal system is built to move slowly for the exact purpose of what's going on right now.
Well, and we want to think if it was a single variance or it was a single issue, but it's the rewriting of the zoning ordinance. So it's not a small thing. So I think
Right.
that's my biggest okay, because we don't want to have to be like, oh God, yeah, why didn't we think of that? Right? Like, why didn't we think of this? And I trust Jeff's expertise and what he does and what he can bring in from other areas, and make it fit for what is best for our town and what is actually going to help solve the problem that we went after in the first place.
So here's an idea. Why don't we, if the council is amenable to this, why don't we can delay this first reading until our next regular meeting, and then that will give the community time, because we'll be hubbing and bubbing about it now. So that'll give the community time to weigh in if they have things that they want to weigh in on. If we don't hear from people in that 2-week period between now and then we can assume that that the information that we're dealing with is either stuff that is that they're relatively compliant with, or that is not consequential. And if we do reach out, if we reach out and we do some work on this with the paper and WTIP and a couple of other outlets, then we can at least be sure that we've reached out to people. Kelly?
That was my question, is what is our plan to try to reach people? And there isn't an easy answer. And I think a lot of it is that people don't trust, I'll say the city, because that encompasses all of us. And I'm a part of that. But I go back and I think about the Highway 61 project. And when I came to council, that was already in full swing and going. And yet we hear how people come back and say, well, I didn't know anything about this, and I didn't do this, and I didn't do that, and you didn't do this. And I know that people, I'm one of them, people don't get involved in something unless it really speaks to them and they're part of it. Like it's going to happen to them. Like I said, if I took down my house and put up row houses right here, pretty certain my whole neighborhood would be abuzz and going, hey, wait, what did we miss? So I'm wondering how we convey to people to really take a look at this document, even if it's just, here's what's happening. I like what we have, how it's kind of concise. And I want to say what I mean, so I say it right. So if people are looking, the summary of it all. One, the R2 district is proposed for elimination. If people go look at these things, even if we get some of that out, can that summary be in the paper? So people then maybe really will go take a look. I don't like using my Facebook page for city stuff because it's my personal page, but I will go share there to my friends that, hey, this is happening and it's happening soon. And I want you to look at it and I want you to come back and talk to us, email me. I don't have hours a day and I won't stay up till 11 o'clock at night talking to people, but I want to hear what people have to say. So somehow, I don't know how we think outside the box. I know Patrick's worked really well at that, and that's his job. But I want to have engagement as to, here's what the hard work has produced. What do you think? Look at your neighborhood. Think about your family. Think about your kids, your grandkids. How does this affect? I go back to one of the people that attended the meeting, and he said, think 7 generations deep. I haven't forgotten that. How does that affect the people coming up that want to be here? So that's really what I'm trying to accomplish. It isn't about what's been wrong with the process. I think the process has been really good, but somehow we got to get people to engage better, and I'm not sure how we do that. If it's a lack of trust, that they think we're just going to go ahead and do what we want anyway, and if we don't listen, or what that venue is, but I want to find it if we can.
Well, I'm glad to hear, the rest of the council, kind of voicing that concern, because, I do think these are complicated times, and trying to find a way to engage people in a process that, as Mike says, is not that interesting and really is a challenge to get people to want to step up and participate in. I mean, reading a 70-page ordinance that really would put most people to sleep, is not much fun. So you can see why people aren't really stepping up. But we have a responsibility to make sure that we've done our best to try to get people to participate in this process before we make this decision. And I think moving it from the Planning Commission to the council takes it one step further. The Planning Commission, I think, did as much as they could do with this document, given the guidelines and expectations that we were given. Now it's up to the council to decide if the work of the Planning Commission has been, is adequate, and the type of ordinance that we want to have for the city of Grand Marais. We haven't heard from many people about this, and that's the concern that I have, is that, the council adopting this ordinance doesn't make it work. The community accepting it is what makes it work. And I think we've got some ways to go to make sure that we're going to get that right.
All right. So then I think that what that looks like is that we then table this conversation and we put together another plan for communication. That means we may not see this again for another 2 weeks to a month to more time, depending on how long it takes to put some kind of communication together and have that be successfully put out there. Jeff, what do you got?
Could I make a couple of comments?
Yes.
So we have found in other communities, like some people have said, I think Anton said, it was a super dense document. In general, it's pretty hard to get the public to read a zoning ordinance, and they're not very familiar with it in the first place. So we've talked about, staff and the Planning Commission has talked about how, it's probably more about education than anything. And I feel like the way we approached it, and I feel like this was led by staff as much as anybody, was as we went through considering changes with the Planning Commission, we talked about what is the reason for these rules in the first place. So we talked about, why are there side yard setbacks as an example? Why are they the number that they are today? What's the function of the side yard setback? And then, recommended a change to it. And people, I felt like on the Planning Commission, felt better about, based on that, I think I'm okay with that change then. But to do that with the public would be pretty onerous. To do that kind of education. I don't know how many people are actually interested in that. When we have done open houses for zoning ordinances, we have not gotten a lot of people there. And typically the people that have strong feelings are people that have strong feelings about something specific, like changing a parking requirement, or their property is going to be rezoned or something like that. So I agree with you that more, public input would be good. But I think for people to actually see the changes, they're not going to read the ordinance, I don't think. They're going to need to see the highlights. And I don't know if we can show it at this meeting, but we do have a one-page summary that actually has pictures on it, which helps all of us. But it's a one-page summary of what we feel like are the significant changes, because it's easy to get lost in red lines because some of it's not change. They're not changes, they're reorganizing, and you don't, normal people don't want to look at that kind of stuff, and they don't need to. So in my mind, the tool would be something like that one-page summary or something short like that, that people can say, oh, okay, the setback's changing, the lot width is changing, and they can react to that. The danger is they may not really know what the side yard setback should be or what a good one is in the first place. So for somebody to say, oh, is it okay to go from 10, what that's based on is going to be pretty different by person probably, but at least they can react to it.
Yeah, and I was observing the the memo that was put together for the ordinance, for the city council summary. I thought that was a pretty good. There's 15 points in there that were modifications to the original zoning ordinance that were made, and I thought that was really quite helpful too, because after you look through those different 15 points, then you can go down to the red line, and I was able to track it easier and know what was being done at those different places. So that one-page summary or a memo like this, I think that combining our different conversations here, talking about getting public comment on it, but also educating the public about what these changes could do, what the purpose for them is, and why they were pursued. Those two things together, I think, are where we want to end up. So if that's where the council sits on that, then we can move forward with attempting to put something together like that. But it will take some time to do that.
It actually won't take any time at all because we've already done it.
Hot damn!
So
look at that.
That's I want to both honor your reaction to the non-reaction that you got and take up the challenge to go out and try to get a reaction for you. But also, I don't want to leave you with a false sense of if we just try this, then because there hasn't been anything that you've talked about tonight that we haven't already done twice. So here is Patrick sharing with you a summary that we've published in the newspaper, and it's on our webpage. And I think we thought the same thing you did, Jay. This is the level that most people are going to want to at least be introduced to this topic at. Some information at a real summary level about what's going on. And then there'll be a percentage of those people that might dig in and want to know more and come read for themselves or watch the meetings or ask questions. And thus far that hasn't happened, so we're going to have to try a different way.
So does that work for the council if we try and get this, try again to get this energy or this information out to people? If we, kind of give it the one last good college try, and then whether or not we hear back, then we can start pursuing our own investigations as to whether or not this is the right thing to be done. Like Kelly was saying, not just for right now, but for the future as well. Does that work for everyone? Because if it does, then I think that we have a tack to move forward with this that has a process that gets us to a resolution at some point. So does that seem to work, Anton, Kelly?
Yeah, I am. And, somehow I would like to see, again, I don't want to drag this out forever. This is one of the things we wanted to concentrate on. We have done that. The Planning Commission did the work that we asked them to. Jeff and HKGI did. So I would like to see maybe that we just put the first reading at the first meeting in August. It's a month out. The second reading would then be, by the end of August, and we're moving forward with it. And I think it's up to us as counselors to assist our staff in getting the word out there, however we choose to do it, whether it's phone, mail, email, by bus, train, banner in the sky, whatever we do, right over the harbor. But that we get the information out there to people and say, hey, we really want your input on this. This is important, because the summary is great, but I think sometimes you have to paint people a picture of, here's one of the things. And maybe it's a discussion with friends to say, okay, here's something in here. Anton was talking about setbacks and maximum. To the building community and people that are other builders, that may mean something to them, where they go, hey, wait, did you think about this? if I talk to neighbors about, hey, do you realize that you could have a townhouse possibly in your neighborhood? What do you think of that? And they might say great, or they might say, well, couldn't you do that in this section of town? So it would be nice to have those conversations with people somehow. And I don't expect that our full population will reach out to us, but it would be nice, between the 5 of us counselors and some staff, that we could have 30 people respond with thoughts. So I'm going to make it my goal to see what I can get back out of people in the next couple of weeks.
Does that work for everyone? Anton, I know you probably have some comments as well, but we have this proposal to put it back until the August meetings. Does that work for everyone? I mean, is that amenable to the council, or do we have different concepts about the timing on this? I agree that I don't think this needs to be rushed, really, but just want to make sure we're all on the same page here. Go ahead, Anton.
I don't know why we couldn't, unless, maybe I missed that. Sorry, I was trying to find something else in the new wording. Got distracted. But what's wrong with the next meeting? 3 weeks? It's 3 weeks out now, right?
Yeah, I mean, if we put it off to the first meeting in August for the first reading, then that basically puts us back a month. 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
Well, July 29th is I was saying the last of the July meeting. What's wrong with that? That's 3 weeks from now.
My suggestion, Anton, was the first week of August. That basically gives us a month to try to get some real feedback.
Okay.
That was my suggestion.
All right. Yeah, that's fine.
Then does everybody think that's all right? Because then that gives us a month to start working on getting some information out to people again, and then that'll kind of be like our Hail Mary, like our last little our last chunk. Tim?
Yeah, I mean, I think that gives a reasonable amount of time for those that may want to engage in the process to step up and participate. I mean, again, Mike has made it pretty clear that getting people to want to be part of a zoning ordinance process is challenging, and I think, but I do think we need to make every effort before we adopt this ordinance so that we are clear what we're doing here.
Okay. All right. Well, then I think we'll just move forward like that. So we have that one pager. We have some information from HKGI. So Patrick and Mike and I will sit down and we'll try and figure out some ways to get that out. I think, Kelly, you're honestly probably as much on it as anybody, just being that we've just got to talk about it. Like people just have to talk about it. And that's the only way we're really going to get feedback from people.
Okay.
So
Mike, could you send me just a clean copy of that draft instead of it being attached to like our agenda for tonight? Just when you get a chance.
Sure.
Thanks.
all right, so we're going to move ahead with that. So we're going to table that one. So thank you for the robust conversation. I do appreciate that. I think that we, that whole conversation wraps up a process that we don't want to take lightly. So that's I appreciate that. But we will move on. We're going to move on right now. So moving on to the emergency update. So first of all, we'll start at the emergency update, whether Mike or Patrick have any additional information for the emergency update. And then one of the things that we should discuss tonight is this concept of a mask ordinance. So we'll leave that off till we get other announcements done, and then we'll go from there. So Mike, Patrick, do you have any updates? Oh yeah, bye Jeff. He just dropped out. So Mike and Patrick, do you guys have any updates for the emergency pandemic stuff?
I don't.
No.
Okay. Well, I guess I can kind of start the conversation into this concept of a mask ordinance. So the first thing we should talk about is time frame here. So we found out about the request from the business coalition not very long ago. Just a couple days ago. We have not had an opportunity to prepare any kind of materials or background or anything like that for this meeting. So I want to take the temperature of the council here to see, because we have the ability to have a meeting next Wednesday, and this could be, if we want to entertain the concept of a mask ordinance for the city of Grand Marais, then we can have Chris do some work on that. We can come back next Wednesday and we can discuss it, debate it, do what we need to do then. If the temperature of the council is pretty cool towards this, then I would say that we wouldn't really need to discuss it too much farther. So those I think are our options here. So I wanted to see where we're at, what we should be planning for a conversation on this. So Kelly, go ahead.
Lo and behold, I'm speaking again. So in our minutes from last council, which we approved, we talked about this very thing. It says businesses are asking the council to encourage more face coverings and social distancing in public. Chris explained that it would be very difficult for the city to take action requiring face masks. It would be difficult to enforce. We have executive orders from the state to provide guidance about wearing masks and social distancing. The city already put out a statement. We do not have the legal authority to require face coverings, and it would not be enforceable. So I'm wondering if anything has changed since 2 weeks ago when we talked to Chris.
Jay, can I chime in just a little?
I was hoping you would.
I think that the issue of enforceability is going to be there with a face covering ordinance in terms of how it is utilized. Certainly, with indoor public spaces, there is the ability to craft something in particular with government facilities. We can do something from that regard. We could even, require certain measures in, private businesses where they otherwise are serving the public, where members of the public congregate, whether it's a bar or restaurant or whatever other business where you have members of the public coming in and out of that particular business. Some cities are doing this. I think the Business Coalition put forth the Minneapolis proclamation, and as a statutory city, we don't have the ability to do a proclamation like Minneapolis did. So it would have to be in the form of an emergency ordinance. Some cities are doing that. Duluth, I believe, either adopted something or is about to adopt something. There are a few other cities like Edina and Rochester that have done either a proclamation or an ordinance. Two of the cities that I represent are now have done something. Winona utilized Rochester's proclamation, and the mayor did a proclamation down there. And then Northfield is considering, I think in the next week or two, doing an emergency ordinance. Now, the components of these proclamations or ordinances have been very, very similar among the cities that have done this. The issue of enforceability, Mankato is another one. Mankato and Duluth took, I think, a more aggressive approach on having the enforceability of an ordinance, meaning that they put specific penalty provisions in there, making, violations a misdemeanor. And, again, it's, to the extent that your police, the sheriff's department are going to go around and try to, enforce this, that's another question. But, certainly there's a political statement that could be made by this. There's the statement that, and I think this is why some cities are doing this, not only is in some of these cities that have done this because they saw a spike or seeing some level of surge in the number of cases in these communities, and are trying to combat the public health aspects of it. So I think that certainly is a focus of some of these communities in doing this. There is the legal authority for us to adopt public health, safety, and welfare regulations. This would be something like that. I think the biggest piece of this is, in terms of structuring something like this, the uniformity of these are, they basically have a general statement of, face masks are required in places of, public indoor accommodation, and then defining what that is, whether that's, city government facilities or private businesses. And then they list a number of, 8 or 10 exceptions, for, children under 2 years of age, people that have medical conditions. There's a bunch, people that are hearing impaired, those types of issues are dealt with as exceptions in there. And then there's an enforcement provision. And in Rochester, the enforcement, and Winona, the enforcement provision was basically a warning type of a system. They did not make violation a criminal penalty versus a Duluth or a Mankato, where they did make a violation a criminal penalty. And so obviously, if you did decide to move forward with something like this, you would have to decide how you want to deal with that. If you want to take the lighter touch like a Winona or a Rochester did, or whether you want to have a more specific enforcement penalty provision like a Duluth or a Mankato did. So I think, if you want to do something like this, we can craft something that would work in Grand Marais. But I think in thinking about it, I guess the two issues which Jay already pointed out is, one is, do you have any interest in doing this at all in terms of requiring face masks? And then number two, if you do, what is the penalty type of provision that you're really looking for on something like this? And then the other, obviously, wild card here is this is being talked about and has been intimated by the governor's office in terms of doing something statewide. There have been a number of communities that have called for the governor to take action to have some sort of uniformity among communities so that, every city that you go into doesn't have different requirements. So all of that, I guess, comes into this discussion, and that is, I guess, basically what I know about it at this point in time.
To add to that, sorry, my computer died, so I had to switch to my phone. To add to that, I think what has changed in the past couple of weeks or since we last talked about this is that people are getting really more frustrated with people who are not seeking to comply with the requests. So they're looking for the next level of how do we make this, how do we bring this to the next level, right? Like how do we make a statement like what Chris said that then has a little bit more pull behind it. And that's, I think that's what's changed. So, I don't know. I think that we could go either way with this. Honestly, I wanted to see what the council thought about whether we should have Chris work on drafting some stuff up, whether we should look at some of these other examples and have a concept prepared for our next meeting for how we would take a look at this if we wanted to take a look at this. So what does everybody else think?
Well, I'm curious. Obviously, the business coalition, and I think you're right, Jay, the letter came out of frustration. But they're not here, I kind of would like to hear from them and say, okay, if we did some format, what is your recommendation of enforcement? Because we don't have the staff to enforce. I mean, it's summer in Cook County, and it's a different summer, and it has all of its own variations of problems that I think law enforcement, this would not be high on the list, and rightly so in some past. I mean, Life Flight's been here the last 2 days. You know, things are happening, lots of stuff's going on. I don't know where this would be as far as them enforcing, so I'd be curious as to what the Downtown Business Coalition is looking for. I did receive a message through Messenger and a phone call, a voicemail today. Both were business owners within city limits who were absolutely vehemently against it. And we have obviously, you know, a couple letters from people who were in support of it. And then obviously the owner of Subway, you know, it sounded like he believes in the mask wearing, but he wasn't sure that it was a good idea for us to impose it to the business. So there again, it kind of feels like, as far as the public spectrum, it's kind of a tie, with the exception of the business coalition, and how do we enforce it? That, I think that's the hard piece. I don't want to create something and spend a lot of time on something if, once again, we're going to say something, but we aren't going to enforce it. That's getting really old to me. So,
And I think I've sent some messages to the governor's office as well, basically intimating the fact that you know, hey, local governments, we're trying to figure this out, and if you're going to do something, you should probably do something, you know, just to make sure that it happens, because it doesn't make a ton of sense for us, I think, to put a bunch of time and energy into creating a certain expectation in the community and then having that expectation be changed. The most effective ways to do this, I think, are on a broader scale than just the city of Grand Marais. So, you know, we're talking about the state, we're talking about the county. Those are other things, and we've been working with those. I mean, those people, the city. I've been attending the biweekly emergency preparedness committee meetings, and in those meetings we brought this up. Like, we've brought this up a number of times. The last meeting I brought it up rather pointedly, asking the other members of the committee what they thought about this. And you know, their take on it was pretty similar to what the conversation that we've had tonight, basically saying, like, well, you know, it definitely makes a statement, but is it going to make anything better? I mean, I do believe that there's value in the statement of an ordinance like this. I honestly just am not certain that that's the best way to seek a solution for it. So if that's what the council wants to do, if we want to go and look through, you know, look through some options, have Chris put some stuff together, then let's get that statement out there. Let's get that work started. But we're not going to be able to do anything on it tonight, other than basically discuss whether we want to pursue it or not. So I guess that's where I'm at with it. And maybe I'm missing a couple of major points here, but that's the question that I'd like to have answered tonight. Is this something we should pursue? Is this something that we should put energy into drafting? Or what other partnerships do we have that we can seek to get this information out there and get this understanding to be more strongly held in the public? Because that's what we're looking for. We're looking for a stronger understanding in the public that there is an expectation in Cook County for people to wear masks in public places and to actively use a face covering when you're in enclosed places or in high density places. So if I'm reading that wrong, let me know. But I think that's where we're at.
Jay, can I chime in just one more Thing?
Always.
The two primary schools of thought on this related to enforceability really are the sort of the Rochester approach and the Duluth approach. I mean, certainly, you know, I could provide both of those to Mike, and Mike could send that out to council, and it would give you something that you could at least look at. And then you could, you know, at least you'd have something that you could read and say, okay, I guess these are the two schools of thought out there on this. You know, do we have any interest in moving forward with something like that? And then I guess you could discuss that at a subsequent meeting, if you're interested in seeing that.
Well, what does the council think? Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, you know, I worked out at the Fud Shop this weekend, and yeah, I can tell you, you know, we required mandatory masking, and I mean, we had almost, I mean, I would say almost 100% compliance. I think there was one individual that I had to ask to put on a mask, and you know, it was a teenager that, you know, quickly threw his T-shirt over his face and walked out the door. I mean, other than that, I mean, everybody was, you know, fully masked up, and in fact, I had a number of people comment specifically about the fact that we were requiring masks, and it made them feel better about you know, being in an inside space, and we're glad that we were taking those precautions. But I know that the issue is a significant issue for businesses. They're concerned about their employees, their own personal health, and you know, if somebody contracts COVID, what that might mean for their business in terms of having to shut down, having to, you know, have employees that may get sick, and we all know that pretty much every business in town has, you know, is operating with shoestring level of employment. You know, I mean, there just aren't enough employees to go around to fill all the requirements that businesses have, and I think just there's a lot of tension and anxiety, and you know, at the very least, I think that we should be at least sending a letter to the governor asking for statewide standards that would mandate some kind of policy for mask wearing that's consistent throughout the state. And whether we choose to decide on something more specific, specifically tailored to Grand Marais, I mean, I think that's, you know, I think some would feel more comfortable if we would. Obviously, would create some tension, you know, from those that would not like that. But you know, again, these are extraordinary times, and I think trying to make the best decisions to protect public health, you know, it's our charge and responsibility to do that. And I think we have to weigh that when we make any decision.
And just, Tim, I know, you know, Northfield actually adopted a resolution last night to do just that. They adopted a resolution basically requesting that the governor look at the issue and, you know, proceed with what you just said. And I don't know if other communities are doing that too, but that's certainly, you know, certainly if that's a direction that you want to go, I can certainly get a hold of Northfield's resolution and provide that to Mike. And that might be something you could consider too.
I mean, I also have no problem writing a letter on behalf of the city council, but I mean, unless that carries more power if it's in resolution form, but that's, you know, that's something as well that we have available to us. Anybody else thoughts on this? How should we proceed with this?
I would like to make a motion that we send a letter, and whether it's a resolution in the resolution form to the governor's office, requesting support for a statewide standard for masks in public places. I'll leave it at that.
So there's a motion. Is there a second for that motion?
Wait, let's define a public place. Because what the Downtown Business Coalition requested was outdoors, indoors, unless you're on your own property or your own yard. Enforcement, yes, you can write all the laws you want to enforce it, but who's going to enforce it? You know, I'm not going to pick up the phone and dial 911 if I got somebody in my store that refuses to wear a mask. This is what Jim Boyd suggested, and I don't think our law enforcement can handle the calls they're going to get. I run a store. I've been open every day through all of this. I see people from out of town visiting my store. They wear a mask. I'd say 95% of the people get out of their car, fill up with gas, walk to the door, put on a mask. I do not require my employees to wear a mask. They can if they want. Some of them do. I have never gotten any negative feedback from a single tourist telling me why my employees aren't wearing a mask. So if you're going to draft a letter and send this to the governor on behalf of the city council, my name is not going to be on it. I do not support this. I don't think I need to police my taxpayers on whether or not they're wearing a mask or not if they're walking through town to pick up a pizza at Spananoli's. If you think people are going to wear a mask all of the time when they're on the beach throwing a rock, which is a public place, they're not going to wear a mask. And then you're going to have to enforce it. So you're probably wasting our attorney's time to do this. I can understand public places. If you want City Hall, which isn't even open, or the liquor store, or City Park, or whatever you're doing on city land, I think that's one thing. But to shove this down private businesses' throats, I think it's a reach. And if you're a business who require people to wear a mask, that's your business choice. And I'm not against it. Believe me, I go shopping in Grand Marais to businesses that require masks. I put one on. I don't have a problem with it. I'm not offensive with it. It's fine. But I think to mandate something like this is a stretch. And at this point, I'm just thinking it's a waste of time, because how are you going to enforce it? That's my biggest thing. You can write all kinds of rules and laws and regulations, but I'm not going to run down the city street yelling at somebody because they're not wearing a mask because they're on a public street. That's not my job, and I'm not going to do that. That's my opinion. I'll leave it up to
the motion. The motion on the table. The motion on the table right now is a motion to write a letter to the governor. Is that correct, Tim?
It is, and it's not to create, and it's not creating an ordinance. And I mean, I'm not asking for specific standards. I'm saying that there should be uniform standards throughout the state that should apply to public spaces, and let the governor and the state of Minnesota decide what those standards should be. I mean, I think what Chris has said is that we don't want to see every community have different standards, you know, because they adopt something that is different from the next community. I think that it makes a lot of sense to have similar, consistent standards that apply, so people know what to expect, and whether it's required on the sidewalk. I'm not suggesting that's the level that I want to take this to, because I don't think we're writing this ordinance. You know, I think what we're asking is for the governor to create standards that apply to protect public health.
Okay, so we have, I mean, we still have to follow the process on this ordinance, or on this motion too. So there was a motion. What Tim just clarified was to write a letter to the governor encouraging the development at the state level of uniform expectations for the use of masks within the state. So did I summarize that correctly, Tim? You can just nod your head if you, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that's the motion. Is there a second for that motion? We'll start there. If there isn't a second for that motion, then we know that we'll go look someplace else. But is there a second for that motion?
I'd second, and then as long as I can do some discussion, I guess, just to keep.
Yep,
the
well, that's what where we're at right now.
I think that my understanding that I could be wrong, Craig, and I can go back and read that letter from the business coalition, but what I was not, I wasn't, I guess what I didn't take that to mean that if you were like going out for a walk, like around town, that you needed to put a mask on. More so if you were in I thought it just was basically reaffirming what we already talked about with supporting businesses' decisions to do it. But then also like what the CDC guidelines are, where if to physically distance is the best thing. And if you can't physically distance, to wear a face covering. I mean, I did actually go and pick up a pizza from Svenoli's tonight, and I was like one of 2 people of 20 waiting to pick up their stuff. And, I couldn't, I had my mask on because I just always have it on because I'm in and out of places. And, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think like it just, and it wasn't that, it was, we need people up here. We want people up here, but it was kind of like, it wasn't anybody I knew that I guess I was standing next to. Right. So I don't know where they came from, if they came from Arizona or Florida or wherever. It doesn't matter where they came from, but I know, it just, yeah. I think the creation by the governor to create language that makes it uniform across the state helps businesses to be able to make those decisions and support them. I mean, similarly, it would be if we were to make that say like, yeah, we want to do this, it would help the businesses that want to do it but are nervous about it to be able to fall back and say like, well, but the city council says you have to do it, right? But that's a big responsibility for us to put on. We don't have a health department, right? We look to the county, but ultimately to the state and the federal government as far as what the best standards are. So I think it's, above our pay grade as a small city council in a small town, with a handful of city staff to try and do that. I would be, Chris, if it's a possibility, I'd be interested in looking at least to get that information from Northfield. I think I'd be interested in it, whether or not we do anything with it. It'd be interesting for me to read and see what their language is like, if that's possible. And I guess that's what I have to say. So my support and seconding of that motion is in the understanding that it isn't us forwarding on the Downtown Business Coalition's request. It is more of a request for the governor to make a uniform standard.
Any other discussion? Any other conversation on that?
Well, I struggle with all of this terribly because to me it's not a Democrat and Republican decision, it's a human decision. The governor, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but has this not come out that he has requested people wear a mask where social distancing is not, where you're not able to social distance, and that obviously you're supposed to social distance 6 feet or more away. If you're unable to, you should wear a mask covering your face. That means above your nose, below your chin, which I know is some of the problems from a friend who works in a retail store here in town. They walk in with it, but then they drop it below their nose. Some of the people who work in town, I know people are wearing them below their nose or they drop them down. The whole right way of wearing it is in question. And I think the governor's given those guidelines. So if we write a letter to him asking for some sort of standard in uniformity, which I understand, but I think it's kind of there. The piece to me that's missing is we're asking him to say, you do this or this. And that comes back to enforcement. And then that comes back to how do we do that? So that's where I struggle. I comply where people ask me to. I don't live in mine because I work at a very small place. I don't have to deal with the public in close quarters. And I don't think either way it makes a person a bad person or a good person. You know, I think we're all trying to find our way through this. So that's just my piece. Is I think the governor has already come out with what his requests of the public are and given us guidelines based upon CDC. So if he's already done that, what more are we asking him to do? It feels like the piece that's missing is, if you don't do this, here's what happens to you. And that's the piece where we as a small community struggle. But maybe somebody knows something different. That's just how I see it.
Yeah, I think it would be the mandate side of it. I think, Kelly, is what I understand is what really many states now are finally doing, instead of guidelines and recommendations, right? Which I totally agree with you on. Like, well, what do we do in that regard if somebody doesn't? But if we can get, because it is a mandate statewide that you need to wear a mask when you're in a space, a public space, basically, that you're still going to have people that don't do it, and you're still going to have people that, you know, I mean, those people I was standing next to, it's not like I was like said anything to them and they didn't say anything to me. We just were standing there waiting for pizza, right? I mean, that's not judgment at all, but it's just yeah, I don't know.
There's definitely that, you know. I know I'm glad Tim's experience was good this weekend, because I know for some of the other people I've talked to, their experiences are, and many people say, thank you, I'm glad you're doing it. And other people are rude. Other people, oh, you've drank the Kool-Aid, you know. So that's and even with the mandate, then if it's mandated, you know, I would comply. But then who's going to enforce, or does it just be? That's the part I struggle with, and I don't know what the answer is. Is if you mandate it, how does that happen? Because I think those that are already complying are still going to comply, and those who aren't complying probably still won't comply. I don't know.
I agree with you, Kelly. I mean, I do think that, I mean, it has been politicized, and I think that makes it difficult. And I think like it's become like a point of like, well, it's become politicized. I mean, I think, for example, like there was a stay-at-home order, right? And not everybody did it, but a lot of people did. And I think that showed some like solidarity and some, but it's been so long now, I feel like, and again, it's not easy. It's not easy, you know. I did just read a study that just came out that with Governor Walz discussing the mandate for mask wearing, and you know, if with a 95% rate of mask wearing, like the estimates for like what's going to happen through the fall with cases in Minnesota is actually down, like pretty good, like compared to other places that are just going crazy. And, you know, I mean, I think that I don't know. It's a tough one, you know. I mean, it is the personal freedom. It's personal, you know, but I feel like that's where it changes, right? I mean, it's the guy from Hovland that wrote, right? I mean, like secondhand smoke. I mean, in the same way, you know, I mean, we don't let that happen anymore. And
I go back to the businesses, and you know, 4 business owners, but 3 publicly downtown. 3 of you have shops, and if the mandate came, because I think that's what the business council is also struggling with. At least that's what I'm hearing on the side. Is some of the businesses require, some of the businesses don't. So they're like, our whole community is sending a mixed message. And again, I'm not saying who's right or wrong. That's not my job. But I think they're struggling with that. So then what happens if it becomes mandated? Are all the businesses going to come into compliance, or are they still going to say, I don't want to do, I don't know. I don't know how the three of you deal with this. It's a difficult issue. And
Well, let's try and break this down into compartments here. So right now we have a motion that's standing that we need to vote on for whether or not we're going to send a letter to the governor's office that encourages the statewide implementation of mask wearing standards, with definitions of what and where and how. So whether or not that's an effective strategy or not, we still need to vote on that, and we need to figure out beyond that whether or not we are going to instruct our attorney to pursue gathering information for us about ordinance drafting for an ordinance within the city of Grand Marais. So those are the two things I see that we have here to do tonight. And so I'm going to ask one more time if there's any more conversation on this resolution or on this motion for a letter to the governor's office, and then we can take a vote on that. So is there any more conversation about that motion?
I'm just going to quick say one more thing and I'll make it fast. I guess in a way, as a counselor, sometimes my personal beliefs have to be set aside for the better of the public. And when I look at how our businesses right now are struggling with trying to find employees and fill jobs and keep doors open and everything else, I think I need to make a decision based upon what is best for the public in the community that I live in right now. It may not be the same thing that I think personally or how I act, but I think I need to step up for those people who need security at a time that is really not so secure. So I'll just leave it at that.
Any other comments?
Yeah, just go back to the original premise. This is a public health issue, and these are complicated times, difficult situations. There's a lot of tension, uncertainty. I think all we can do is try to do our best and try to figure out how we can manage ourselves through this difficult situation, which may be with us for a while. And my motion is really to help address the public health issue.
Anything else? Any closing comments? All right, then we're going to go to a roll call vote on this. So, Councilor Moody, your vote.
Aye.
Councilor Swearingen, your vote.
Aye.
Councilor Schulte, your vote.
I abstain.
Councilor Kennedy, your vote.
Aye.
And I will vote aye to the letter as well. So that we will work on drafting a letter to the governor's office on this. Would the council like to see this letter before we send it out?
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
Yep.
Okay. Then we will do that. We will send it out to the council members before we do that. So the next and I think last question for this discussion is whether or not we want to have whether we want to task Chris with gathering information on the different tasks that different communities have taken for the drafting of an ordinance for the city of Grand Marais.
I don't know if I switched from my computer to my phone, so I don't know if Chris responded or not. But is it easy enough to just share the draft or whatever the one in Northfield was? Is that easy enough just to get in front of us and then we can see if oh yeah, it seems like a good fit with this, or let's just see what comes for the governor.
I can very easily send Mike, and Mike can distribute to you the two versions of the ordinance that are circulating out there. I'll send you Duluth's and then perhaps Rochester's, because those are the two I think that are circulating. In probably 10 minutes or less, I could do that.
Okay, thank you, Chris. That's what I'd want. I'll let anybody else chime in.
So perhaps then this is kind of a hybrid of what I had said our options were before. So then we'll have those options to look over as far as Rochester and Duluth's different takes on this on a citywide mandate, and then we can reconvene on this next Wednesday, something like that. Does that seem to work for people?
Yes.
I have a question. Then obviously something has changed since our meeting of 6/24 that Kelly had read, and I have a copy of it in front of me, that now all of a sudden the city does have the legal authority to require face coverings and can enforce it. That's changed.
I think, Craig, sorry. All I want to do is I want to see what those other cities are doing. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I want to see is like, what is their language?
I understand that, but can they enforce it? Is it legal for them to enforce it? Or what are we doing here?
So, Chris, maybe that's a legal.
But if we're wasting our time, it seems like we are, because we've already been told what we can't do. And now we are told we can maybe do it. Were we ill-advised last time? I just want to know what's going on here.
I don't think I advised that you can't do it last time. I don't think that's entirely accurate.
In front of me, it's written in black and white. The city.
Well, that's nice that it's written in black and white, but I'm telling you it's either written. That wasn't what I intended by that statement, I guess. My intent was never to say that we could not do this. And I don't think I did say that, but nonetheless. So we have the ability to do regulations for public health, safety, and welfare. So yes, we can do it. And what I did say was that enforceability is difficult. So yes, we can do it, but enforceability is difficult. So whether the minutes reflect that, I don't know. I didn't look at the minutes.
I mean, I go ahead. I mean, Jake, all I'd throw into that is I personally, I would like to be able to see and read the language in those other ordinances that are going around, just to read it for my own understanding, see what the language is. And again, I mean, we also have speed limits, and not everybody gets caught when they're speeding, but I think most people probably go the speed limit. So I think, like, again, I don't know what the language is at all. So I'd like to look at it. That's basically as far as I'd go, as far as whether or not we adopt something, is just to at least wrap my head around that.
Okay. So should we just leave it at that then?
Well, I
Take
need
a
a
look
quick
at
clarification from you then. If we're sending this around, are you wanting to have this on an emergency meeting agenda next week to discuss? Is there anything you want prepared to consider? Or do you want to get back to me on whether or not you want to schedule a meeting to talk about this? You know, any two of you can schedule a special meeting anytime you want with proper notice, and Jay can do it on his own.
I would prefer not to have a meeting next week. I would like to see the language and think it through. And again, to me, it's the enforcement piece, and that piece, you know, by reading the language, understanding what the options are and how it gets laid out there. I really want to be able to think about that. And I think that's going to take me more than a week to process and talk to people about a little bit. So I don't feel like I need to meet next week about it, but I don't know what others think. I will do what the group wants.
think, you know, that we do have, like what Mike said, any two members of the council can declare an emergency meeting. I can do this as well. That's that I'm in the same boat. I want to see what the language is. I want to see how it works. And then have some conversations about that. And, you know, and I have no problem declaring the need for a meeting to discuss this next week if the language seems intriguing to me. You know, if that seems like something that we could do, that would send the message that we're looking to send. And you know, for me, this whole thing has really become kind of a it's become kind of a signal, you know, like we're trying to use this as like a signal flare for people who are coming up here to say, hey, this is how you should behave up here. And we're hoping that you'll all comply with it, because if you don't, we now have something in place that can deal with you. You know, that kind of a situation like that. That's what to me, that seems like what the ordinance is seeking to accomplish. And that,
The problem with that, Jay, when you say that, what I hear is we're sending up that flare. I don't think anybody from Georgia, from New York, from Maine, from Washington State is paying attention to what we're doing, because they're not even looking on websites to see what's open, what's not open, and what people are requiring. You know what I mean? And I'm not trying to argue with you. I'm just saying,
there's always going to be a proportion.
Attention.
Yeah, there's always going to be a proportion of visitors that are just going to not. They're just not going to not pay attention.
I kind of feel like the business coalition threw it at us to figure out for them, because they're not all on the same page. And I don't mean that to sound harsh, but that's kind of how I feel. Is you've got a boxing match going on and they need somebody to come in and referee, and that's where I kind of feel we got put in a position of right now.
Well, I think that that's pretty accurate, Kelly, and I do think that they view the city as the agency that actually has the authority and the power to be able to make a statement that can moderate the behavior. And whether or not that's accurate, you know, we all even on the council here, we have wildly differing perspectives on that tactic. So, you know, I do think that we're going to, you know, there's a couple of different options that we've pursued just tonight, and I think that we can continue to pursue those, or at least gather some more information about them, and then, you know, hopefully not too far in the future, we can make up our mind, or hear from the state, or do something, you know, get some kind of some kind of closure on this concept. So I guess I think that's probably where we'll need to leave it.
Just one more note on that, because knowing enforcement is really going to be the trickiest issue to talk about. Jay and I did meet with Sheriff Eliason today just to open the conversation, and he's more than willing to sit with you in a meeting if you do want to discuss any sort of local regulations and talk about that with you.
Yep, that is a resource that we have available to us.
That's helpful to know, just as we get that information disseminated from Chris or from you, Mike.
Yeah, if we call an emergency meeting, whether it's next week or in 2 weeks before our next council meeting, I mean, could we also make sure that Pat Eliason is invited to come and talk about that issue? I mean, I think that's really relevant, because that's been raised from the very start about how do we deal with enforcement. And, you know, enforcement is a tricky thing. You know, that's the sheriff's responsibility. Let's hear from him how he would suggest dealing with that.
Yes, and he has indicated that he would be more than happy to be in attendance for that meeting, if that meeting happens. So yes, that's where we're at with that. So Okay, so I think that we've got some different concepts here that we're going to be working with. Is this a good place to move on? I think that it's probably as good as any. Can pretty much guarantee that we'll be getting more information and we'll be bringing this topic up again sometime in the future. So yeah, okay. I think we're going to move on. So moving on to council and staff updates. We'll just go through just like we normally do, and then if you have an update, let us know. We'll go from there. I'm going to start with Anton. Is he still here? Or did he? Yeah, he's still here.
I'm here.
Got your update? Go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I don't have an EDA meeting till next week. But one other thing that I guess we did get, did anybody the email about what cities are doing as far as?
Hey, Anton, can you talk a little?
Oh yeah, sure. Whoops, is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I think I had my thinking about. Did anybody else get that from Susan from the tavern as far as the? I mean, she had requested shutting down Wisconsin Street, but there was the conversation. There's a lot of cities right now that are, if you do have outside seating going on, and that is also the sidewalk, like you might be able to maintain social distancing within the the sidewalk area, but obviously then there's people like for the diners, but then there's obviously foot traffic, and traffic is going both directions, and it makes it kind of impossible to function. I know that a lot of cities, big and small, have been converting just like simple areas like in the couple parking spaces to kind of allow either it's more space for pedestrians or more space for those businesses that are need to try and expand. I know Blue Water, I noticed this morning, Blue Water has a couple of picnic tables set up on the north side of their building, which is great, but there limits then pedestrian traffic, and if the roads are open and there's cars parked there, it just kind of adds to the like spillover and craziness. Also, it's super busy in town this like on a Wednesday. I can't believe how busy it is right now. So I don't know if that's really an update, but it's just I wanted to make sure to throw that out there because she wrote to me and that was one of her ideas. I don't know quite how shutting down all of Wisconsin Street would work, but I don't know if there's possibilities within, parking spaces or some of that other area to try and make sure that pedestrian traffic, which I'm assuming will only increase as the next 2 months roll through in July and August, to try and make sure that people have space. Again, picking up pizzas tonight, it's a window that's right on the sidewalk, and it was just a mass of people kind of, people were walking down the street, people were walking down the sidewalk, cutting through people on the line. It's a different situation. And I think that the businesses are trying to adapt, and I don't know what we can do to try and adapt to make things successful, for visitors and for the business owners.
Yep, and I think that we need to hear those proposals and those ideas, and we need to weigh them against the overall functionality of those ideas. So I intend to
You
have
did pass an ordinance that allows businesses to use that public space. So is there an issue with what the ordinance says? Is there something that they're suggesting that we modify? Is there something you're suggesting to modify? I'm not clear what's going on here.
I think the question was, I mean, I think we even looked at it back when we were originally looking at Marais stuff back however many, month or so ago, but like what that would do with tables set up there. And then in their location, they had that light pole right there, right, which made like traffic walking down the sidewalk. Keeping physical distance within parties set up on the sidewalk in that space that they're allowed to function is fine. But then there's the traffic that is the pedestrian traffic that is either forced out onto the road because of that, or are forced to basically walk right. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess from experience, I mean, I was, at 5:15 today downtown, and, the window to serve Svenonoli's, and I don't know, maybe it's not always like that, but if basically the way that like that was formed to like fulfill their not having anything happening inside meant that traffic was either like not traffic, but pedestrian traffic was either like having to like basically cut through people in line, like not meeting physical distancing standards, or we're just skipping the giant mass of people that were crowded in front of the pickup window and just walking out around everybody, in front of where, White Pine North and Crooked Spoon were, and walking around down the street, because obviously the cars were parked in the parking spots there in front of the restaurants. And so I don't know. I don't know if that, I guess it just seems like the idea of allowing that to happen and to use those spaces is fine, but I don't know if it was like fully thought out on like what happens to like the masses of people trying to move from one place to another within those sidewalks. Does that make more sense, Mike?
I can perceive the issue, but what I'm not hearing is what you want to do about it.
Well, Susan was suggesting that we shut down Wisconsin Street, but I don't know how that was her suggestion. And what I was suggesting is potentially using those areas that are, I don't know. I mean, again, that was her suggestion, was we shut down Wisconsin Street. My maybe response to that would be like, what if you gave up a couple parking spots in front of your restaurant where you're doing your outdoor seating, or those couple parking spots that are in front of Svenonoli's? Like, what if those were cordoned off and that became, a spot so that people could wait and people could still walk through, is my thing. So you don't have a group of 35 people standing there and then more people trying to walk through, I don't know. I could reach back out to her and see if she has other ideas. I don't know if anybody else has seen that. I mean, I'm assuming everybody else got that email. I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts on that, or.
I didn't get the email, and I don't know about the tavern, but with Svenonoli's, couldn't they actually wrap around now and kind of go up the alley between the vacant lot and their building instead of spilling out in the street? I mean, I think that that would be a suggestion we could make, and I say we, City Hall maybe could make, that they somehow guide people to go into the alley. I've seen the same thing out in the middle of the street standing, and people are all over, and I get it, and some are trying to social distance, but it seems like you said, at 5:15, that alley's a perfect place to stand and wrap around to.
Yeah, the social distancing aspect of it doesn't help, like to keep the crowd contained, right? Because it just kind of by nature spreads things out even more so. That's all I've got. I guess I'm just throwing that out there.
All right, so we'll let you gather more information on that, I guess. Kelly, your update?
Haven't had any meetings. I mentioned earlier, and maybe Patrick knows, our council packs are not online at the city website. They aren't there since sometime in March. I don't know if there's an issue or if we can get those up.
Sorry, I went and looked and I saw the issue. They are actually uploaded. It's a navigation bar issue, so I'll have to fix that tomorrow, and I can I'll get it fixed tomorrow.
Awesome, thank you. The other thing that I noticed, and I think we've all seen and talked about, I was downtown Sunday picking up donuts, and the amount of garbage that is on our streets and different things. But I did notice, I think we need to add more cans yet. I don't even know if we have any. I was standing waiting to go into the donut shop, and the only garbage can that I could see was across kitty corner over towards the market, which to me isn't a far walk, but obviously if people are dropping and leaving things wherever they walk rather than take it with them, and sometimes you're not going to change people, but having the ease of a garbage can, more garbage cans in places, you know, if it's 4 corners, at least having 2 corners or 3 corners filled with garbage cans. I don't know if we have more or not, but just trying to help it look a little better. I mean, people are asking that we hire more employees and that they go to work early in the morning and clean it all up, and because of how terrible it looks. And I get it. It does look terrible, and I'm sure people are cleaning up, but we are having a mass influx, and I just wondered if there's a potential to get more garbage cans out there.
You know, one other thing too to add to that, Kelly, you know, from what I've read, that the governor's disbursement of the CARE Act, you know, funding is given a certain amount to cities, and Marais has received what, over 100, has the potential to receive over $100,000. Could some of that money be used to offset some of the additional costs for getting additional waste disposal bins out there? You know, I'm not sure, but we need to hire any new staff, but if we could use that to reallocate staff to pick up or clean up those areas, whether it's streets department people sweeping the streets more often. I think we should consider how we might use that federal funding that might help us when we're trying to deal with these situations.
That's a good point, Tim. I think that we'll be talking a little bit about the CARES Act later on. That's the city of Grand Marais is in line to get money from that. It's $106,230 is what has been allocated. Whether or not that's what we actually get will depend on the, you know, how the state chooses to do disbursement on that. So that could be used for that. There's a lot of strings attached to it. That's part of the reason we haven't talked about it, is because, you know, we need to figure that out, like what the strings are and everything like that. So we'll get there. But there's a lot of logistics that go around with how that money is used. So we'll to be continued. On the garbage can front too, the CEC is working on those painted garbage cans. You know, but having the artists do the work on them is going to take some time. So we're not going to have them immediately.
Can they paint them green to match? Because at this point, I'm not worried about the pretties. I'm worried about how unpretty it looks downtown. And I hate to make it sound that way. I don't want to take anything away from them, but we need them. And I noticed one of the restaurants who has outside seating and takeout does not have a garbage can in front of their place. And I think that they should be contacted and asked to please put one in front of their place. If they have outdoor seating that they're serving on to-go containers, I think they need to be having availability for their waste to go into.
We'll keep working on that. A lot of stuff, man. A lot of stuff going on. Craig, your update?
Yeah. To go back to what Anton was talking about with Sven is that my observation is there's no place for people to sit while they're waiting for their order. I think if somebody could provide some seating, maybe sit or whatever, that might help. At least put the waiters where they need to be so the sidewalk can be functionable. There's a lot of people standing there waiting for their food. There's no place to sit. And they have to wait 20 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour and a half sometimes for pizza. So that's just my suggestion on that. But anyway, getting back to the golf report, Paul said that he's having a pretty good spring up there so far this summer. Membership is level. The numbers are up. Business has been good through June. I think he said the dollars are up about $7,000 for the year. A lot of happy golfers. The YMCA postponed their event till fall, but he also said there's a possible another tournament that somebody's organizing for September. If the weather provides for those, that would be great. As far as the parks report, the numbers up for the end of June are up about 8.8%, $20,330. The park is behind 100,000 year to date. However, with some calculating, looking at the 80 to 90% capacity or occupancy that they can run through the end of the year, there's a good chance that they can make up that deficit. Our tenting camping is up simply because the state's sites have been closed. So they're doing a lot more business on that end of that part of camping that we usually don't get, but we are getting that business right now. So there was some discussion on the summer storage for Canadian seasonal campers because we do have 5 that are there and the owners can't come down to use them, but yet they pay a fee. So we had to come up with a fee that was a modest fee that would not be like the full price of a rental, but it was reduced to $500 a month for the 6 months. And I think Dave is going to contact those people to see what they think about that. And they also have a choice to move their camper off the site if they want, but of course they'd have to hire that done because they can't physically come down and do that. What else did we talk about? Oh, there was an application for the water skipping in the harbor, like was done last Fisherman's Picnic, if you guys recall that. However, the application was submitted under the name of Marais, which is not how it's going to be processed. So there was a lot of discussion about this and it was approved. However, on some conditions, and I think one condition is that a new application needs to be submitted with the proper name on it, leaving Marais off. And then also proof of liability insurance needs to accompany that application. And I think that's being worked on right now. So I don't know if Mike, if you've been involved in that or not, but the liability insurance, I think, is a big thing. Marais covered that last year and they're not covering it this year. So it's something that needs to be done. Other than that, I think that's pretty much everything for the park. Thank you.
Great, appreciate that.
Yep.
It's been fun to hear people talking about the golf course. I guess that Paul up there is just really knocking it out of the park. Sounds like the course is in really good shape, which is pretty awesome to hear. So, Tim, your update?
Yeah, I really don't have any committee meetings or anything to really talk about. The Planning Commission, obviously, we've spent a lot of time working on the ordinance, but yeah, the one thing I wanted to mention is, I'm up for re-election this fall, and I've made a decision to not run for re-election after, all these years, and thought it would be a good time to make that announcement so that people that might be interested in considering filing in the fall would have some time to think about that. I'm not sure when the filing timeline is. It's sometime end of August, first part of September, isn't it, Mike? And, just leave it at that.
Well, thanks, Tim. Thanks on a lot of different levels, I guess.
Thanks for all your service, Tim.
So that leaves me, I guess. So there's a number of things that I've been hashing out with people around town as far as COVID response things and business response things and all of these sorts of things. And that's been taking up a lot of time and energy. One of the things that I did follow up actively on with Patrick was we got together and dug in on the seagull situation a little bit more, and looked up the actual application and what the actual criteria for the application are. And I think we were a bit naive in our understanding that writing a letter from the city would guarantee that these people would get like the fast track application in and approved for dealing with these seagulls. It's a pretty onerous application. So Patrick and I are going to work on putting together a kind of a cheat sheet for that seagull depredation permit application to just kind of smooth it out a little bit. It's not something that I think the businesses downtown would have any trouble applying for, but trying to centralize that information, make sure that it's available to people if they're wanting to do it. That's what we're looking to do, and that probably won't take very much time, but it's something that I think hopefully people can access if they need to. So other than that, I think we talked about most of the stuff that's been on my plate in this meeting. So Mike, Patrick, Kim, you have any updates?
I'll handle my updates on Friday.
Okay. Anyone else? All right. Well, thank you for a robust conversation tonight. We have no more business. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Good, everybody.
Good night, everyone.